Hello, Earl McCurty. Thank you for being with us today for the third in the series of interviews. And I am delighted that you agreed to be a part of this. I want to just tell you that you were my original inspiration for this interview series. Something you mentioned on a book club Zoom that we had earlier in the pandemic year, I guess, this summer, made me think, he's got a story that I think other folks need to hear. And that is one of the reasons we started these interviews, and then it just grew from there. So to begin with, where you were born and where you grew up, what were the circumstances surrounding your young life?
I was born November 19th, which is tomorrow, in Birmingham, Alabama, 80 years ago. I am the last of 6 children. The first 5 children were my sisters. So I guess, as I understand the story, when I came along, my father was happy and my mother was happier because therein the quest for the son ceased. And in those days, it was an ongoing process, but at that point, she was able to get some rest. Growing up in Alabama, yes, fantastic. I enjoyed my heritage, and I often tell people that I am the son of the South, which I am. And it pertains to me directly because my father and his father were all from Alabama, and my grandfathers and so forth. So my lineage is in Alabama. I was very close to my maternal grandfather, and he taught me, as a matter of fact, he enforced reading scripture in Alabama under the Chinaberry tree, which was, as I look back, such a remarkable, wonderful experience because I was like 4, I was reading at an early age, and he enjoyed that. But my first scripture was Ephesians 4th chapter. And he had me to not only read it, but to tell him what it meant. And I still cherish those minutes. I left Alabama to attend Howard University in Washington, D.C., which was a high point in my existence. That was in 1958, the fall of 1958. I had just met the love of my life, and earlier that summer, the story was quite remarkable because although I had fancied myself as being a young ladies' man at that time, I saw Mary, and I was absolutely unable to come up with any good words. Although I valued words highly, at that time, the words would not come to me easily. So fortunately, we got off the bus at the same stop, which surprised me. And do you want to know the rest of the story? I had an umbrella, and I asked her if she wanted to get under my umbrella. She said yes. And so now you know the rest of the story. My time to overcome wasn't that shy, but with this girl, I had dreamed of this girl, and then I saw her. And there was a little drizzle, so I had an umbrella, and I asked her if she wanted to stand under it. And with those big, pretty eyes, she looked up and said yes. And there we go. But the time in Howard was like a certain melody. It was a melody because I had so many people that came over my path while I was at Howard. Some radicals, some poets, like Stokely Carmichael, who was a guy under me. He was a sophomore when I was at Howard. And I also had a chance to meet Dr. Martin Luther King while I was at Howard. And I met, of course, he hadn't, as I said, he hadn't had his dream at that time. He hadn't been to the March on Washington. That was long before that. We were just walking down the campus, and he was walking on campus, and he stopped and we talked, and with some more guys. He asked us where we were going, and I don't know if we told him the truth, but we were actually going to the local bar to hang out, but that's another story. But he was very patient and very kind to give us his time to stop and talk with us and chat with us. And then, of course, great Malcolm X came to campus, and other people, James Ball and other people we got a chance to go talk to. Even the Kennedys came to campus. Robert Kennedy, his wife, Ethel, and Jackie. She was pregnant with the little boy at that time, but not JFK wasn't there. So Howard was a seminal point in my life, my existence. Our vice president-elect is an alumnus of. But as you asked the question, after Howard, that's when tragedy struck. Tragedy struck because although I had an offer for a fellowship to study history at Howard, and that was a wonderful offer, but I decided to go out and earn a living because I had a wife and a baby at that time. My Methodist church experience was kindled by my sister, my oldest sister. We moved from one part of Prince George's County to a part of Maryland called Silver Spring. It was somewhat, I guess you would say, tawny. It had a bigger house, wonderful place. It was mixed neighborhood. Schools were beginning to be more mixed, and they had offered an honor education for my children. That was the reason we really moved. So my sister lived nearby, and quite frankly, my sister took my children to school, to church far more often than I did. My church experience was met on the golf course most of those mornings, if not just getting ready for the NFL. It's called Colesville United Methodist Church.
Okay.
Colesville. And they still call Mary quite often to get some information on how they should do things. I think that's quite comical. She's just led a seminar on, I don't know, she wouldn't mind, unlearning racism. They asked her to do that. She said, okay. She did it. She included me. I left Silver Spring and moved. I had a beach home. God was kind enough to give me a beach home down in Ocean City, Maryland, on the Eastern Shore, as they call it. It was just a totally different environment and climate, but we had lived there for about 10, 15 years or so. And we enjoyed it so much that we decided to try to live in two houses at one time. On the radio, I would listen to opera on what was called the Texaco Hour. It came on every Saturday at 12 o'clock, and I could listen to the Metropolitan Opera. And it was great. It was fantastic. And I finally got a chance to go there because my wife took me there for one of my birthdays. And we went to the Met and hung out in Central Park. There's no other place like New York.
How many continents have you traversed?
That's a good question, but I have been to Africa. I have been to Senegal, Africa, and I've been to Egypt, and I've been to where Paul was teaching. Corinth, yeah, we were in Corinth. And of course, Mary had to go and stand in the door where Paul was teaching so I could get a picture of her in the door, in the temple. And it was all good. I said, well, you're living in high clover now. You're standing where Paul was teaching in Corinth. And of course, we saw the pyramids and we saw Tutankhamun's tomb. And we've been able to get around a little bit. We were actually singing in Italy a lot with the choir in Italy and singing with the Italians. They love to sing. And of course, they kind of liked my voice, and I appreciated them for that. And my wife took me to Brazil, so I enjoyed being in Brazil with her and doing the bossa nova and all that good stuff. So
that's 4.
Oh yeah, but the one my visit to Africa, of course, we went to the little place where you go to ship enslaved people out of in Senegal, and we got the door of no return, and that was a very emotional experience for me. When we sailed in on the Queen Mary. My ancestors didn't sail out on the Queen Mary, but Mary and I came back on the Queen Mary. And I told the people who were there to greet us, which was like they had 100 band members out there. Of course, I was pleased to see them as well. And we got off the ship, and they told us, welcome back, welcome back. And it was a tearful experience. And
Give us a message of how you're doing and where you find hope.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because it's been painful. Because, and I have to tell you, my hope is in our youth. I see our youth as always, they've always been so beautiful. In Washington, D.C., and I'm going to digress just a minute. During the war in Vietnam, the kids were out from Georgetown, George Washington, Howard, and everywhere, Maryland, and they were protesting. Now, I didn't really get into that because I was a warmonger early on in my career when I was going to the Air Force. But I saw what those children were saying, and I saw the beatings that they were receiving. Pretty children, wonderful children. All they were doing was saying, stop the violence, stop the hate, stop the war. And my heart went out to, that's why I interpret what I'm seeing now. A lot of our young people just said, no, our great days are ahead, not behind. And that's what I'm interpreting life. And I'm enjoying seeing our young people are just remarkable. All that Christian teaching, Dr. King had to come through, and he had to remind us that, you know, we should get together, we should live together. And John Lewis just recently died, and he wants us to reach the promised land. And in the great words of the great Marvin Gaye, only love can conquer hate. So he wrote an epic song, What's Going On? And he talked about a lot of things. That was one of his lines. And as I said in the Sunday school class the other day, that's one way to deliver yourself out of a morass sometimes, is to go ahead and be loving and be kind.
You shared with me a James Weldon Johnson poem once, and it was about creation, and it was beautiful. Of course, his name rings a bell because he wrote the hymn in our hymnal, Lift Every Voice.
Oh, my, you're absolutely correct.
So I'm familiar with him, but I wasn't familiar with that poem, and it really meant a lot.
Getting here to Florida was simply health related and family related. My youngest daughter moved here. She was a little pioneer to take a job down here, and her two sons were here. So we moved to be closer to my youngest grandson. And my daughter and my second daughter moved down here as well. And we've enjoyed it. It's really helped me, because when I first came to Ocean View, I was on a cane. But I don't have a cane anymore because this wonderful, wonderful heat in Florida zapped all of that arthritis. We enjoyed the beach service. You were up there preaching and preaching. I said, oh my. The sun was coming up. It was an Easter sunrise service. And you were like preaching. I said, look at here. We got a good place at a good time. How am I doing? I'm still living day to day, because I do have faith. Faith, I guess, is a mustard seed, but I'm living, and I'm enjoying the word sequestration. Mary lives in one part of the apartment, and I live in the other part sometimes, and I do my artwork, as you met.
Thank you for being interviewed and for sharing your life with us, Mr. Earl McCurty. And I appreciate your participation in our congregation and your leadership. And I also appreciate everything that you've offered to us in the many classes that you've taken. The conversation has been uplifting.
Well, thank you, Reverend Emily Denmark McGee.